We all remember the nursery rhyme. Little Jack Horner sat in a corner, eating a Christmas pie. He put in his thumb and pulled out a plum and said, "What a good boy am I, it's a harmless image, a cheerful boy, a festive pie, a proud moment." But what if I told you that behind this innocent verse lies a centuries-old conspiracy steeped in betrayal, greed, and even execution? If you enjoy peeling back the dark layers of forgotten history and twisted folklore, make sure you subscribe to the Silent Lodge, where shadows speak and secrets are never left to rot. Let's begin our descent into the real tale behind Jack Horner, or more accurately, Thomas Horner, a man who lived during the chaotic era of King Henry VIII's England. The rhyme you know might just be a clever disguise for a darker truth, one baked into a very real pie. In the 1530s, England was undergoing a seismic transformation. King Henry VIII was dissolving the monasteries, vast religious institutions that held incredible power and wealth. One such place was Glastonbury Abbey, a stronghold of spiritual influence in Somerset. But as Christmas approached in 1539, its days were numbered. Abbot Richard Whiting, aging and increasingly desperate, was running out of time. Fearing the total ruin of his abbey, Whiting devised a plan, a secretive gesture to curry favor with the king. He would send a Christmas pie to the royal court. But this was no ordinary pie. It was to contain hidden deeds to valuable church lands, essentially bribes wrapped in pastry. The task of delivering this covert gift fell to his trusted steward, Thomas Horner. He was no child, but a man burdened with a secret mission. Reluctant yet obedient, Horner agreed to transport the pie across the icy roads of England. But as he traveled, hunger and curiosity began to gnaw at him. Why not take a small bite, just to see what made this pie so special? Inside, he didn't find fruit. He found paper, legal documents. One by one, Horner discovered the deeds, 12 in total, carefully hidden within the crust. Temptation took hold. Horner decided to keep one deed for himself, to a manor called Mells, a property rich in land and even lead mines. The remaining deeds, he delivered them as planned. Thus, the steward became a landowner, the abbot powerless. He could not accuse Horner of theft without revealing his own crime, attempting to bribe the king. The pie had been both gift and trap, and Jack, or rather Thomas, had pulled out more than a plum. The truth was buried in pastry, but the consequences would echo far beyond the abbey walls. Horner, now secretly in possession of the deed to Mells Manor, had secured a fortune with barely a whisper. And Abbot Whiting, he was trapped in a delicate and dangerous silence. Glastonbury Abbey had been among the last to resist the dissolution. The king's forces had already seized dozens of monastic holdings, but Whiting refused to surrender his sacred grounds. In response, Henry VIII struck with finality. In 1539, the abbey was forcibly closed, its treasures looted, its walls desecrated. Whiting was taken to the Tower of London, not just as a religious dissenter, but as a man accused of treason. His crime, officially, it was the misappropriation of church wealth. Unofficially, it was his stubborn refusal to bow before royal power. But the most bitter irony, among the jurors who condemned him was none other than his former steward, Thomas Horner. Let that settle in. The very man entrusted with a desperate mission of survival had now aligned himself with the crown. Some say Horner simply took the king's side to survive. Others believe he orchestrated the downfall from the start, positioning himself for gain while playing both sides. On November 15, 1539, the elderly Whiting, now 78 years old, was bound to a hurdle and dragged through the mud to Glastonbury Tor. There, atop the hill, he was hanged, drawn, and quartered, a sentence reserved for the most treacherous of enemies. His head was displayed above the abbey's western gate. His limbs, dismembered and dispatched, were hung in the towns of Wells, Ilchester, and Bridgewater. a brutal warning to any who might resist the king. The deed to Mel's manor, meanwhile, remained in Horner's possession. His family would live there for generations. And while some descendants firmly deny any connection to the rhyme of Little Jack Horner, the whispers never truly stopped. But what of the pie? No historical record confirms the existence of a literal Christmas pie containing deeds. And yet, the symbolism persists. A plum, in Tudor slang, referred not just to a fruit, but to a reward, often acquired through influence, deceit, or luck. The modern term plum job still carries echoes of this meaning. Even the Latin word for lead, plumbum, links back to the land Horner acquired. Land rich with lead mines. Was the plum not a fruit, but a metaphor for a cleverly obtained fortune? And perhaps that's the real horror in this tale. Not the betrayal, not even the execution, but the reminder that behind even the most innocent children's rhymes, there may lie a calculated act of ambition. In the centuries that followed, the lines between fact and folklore began to blur. What began as a dark episode in Tudor politics quietly transformed into a sing-song rhyme for children. And Jack Horner, or Thomas Horner, became a shadow stitched into English culture, smiling from the corner with pie on his fingers. Yet, the question remains, was this rhyme always about him? The earliest surviving printed version of Little Jack Horner dates to 1725, nearly 200 years after Abbot Whiting's execution. It appeared in Namby-Pamby, a satirical pamphlet written by Henry VIII, mocking a fellow poet who wrote sentimental verse for children. But interestingly, the Jack Horner stanza appears as an already well-known verse, italicized among others, suggesting it had circulated orally long before it was printed. If this rhyme had survived that long, whispered through generations, what inspired it to linger? Some historians believe the name Jack was no coincidence. In English folklore, Jack was often shorthand for a trickster, a mischievous, sometimes dishonest everyman. A Jack could be a thief, a knave, or a fool, a placeholder for the morally flexible. And Thomas Horner fit that mold far too well. We now know that Horner did, in fact, purchase Mel's manor in 1543, just a few years after Whiting's death. A legal deed confirming the transaction still exists, bearing the king's signature. It states the property was sold, not stolen. His descendants use this document to argue against any connection to deception or betrayal. Yet that too invites questions. During the dissolution, it was common practice for King Henry to sell confiscated monastic land at discounted prices to loyal supporters, often to ensure their allegiance and secure power across the country. Was Horner's deal just another reward for compliance? The locals weren't so quick to forget. In the West Country, where Glastonbury once reigned and Catholic sympathies lingered, Thomas Horner became a villain in popular lore. Another nursery rhyme, less known today but no less damning, listed Horner among a group of opportunists. Hopton, Horner, Smith, and Finn. When the abbots went out, they came in. It named those who had benefited most from the church's fall, a poetic indictment carved into memory. These verses were not born from nothing. They came from a community that watched sacred institutions crumble, their lands handed over to ambitious men who pledged loyalty to the king. And while Horner's descendants distanced themselves from the nursery tale, the stain of suspicion has never quite washed away. And so we return to the boy in the corner, smiling over his pie, thumb deep in sweet filling. What a good boy, am I, a phrase drenched in pride, or perhaps irony. By the time the rhyme solidified in English folklore, its deeper meaning had already begun to shift. To many, it no longer told a story of loyalty or betrayal, but rather opportunism, the kind that rewards the clever over the loyal, the cunning over the faithful. In Tudor times, the word plum didn't just mean fruit. It became slang for a hefty sum of money or a valuable reward obtained with little effort. A plum job was something easily earned, often thanks to favoritism, privilege, or bribery. And what did Jack do? He reached into a pie and pulled one out. Whether or not Thomas Horner actually stole a deed from a pie, he did end up with a lucrative estate. Whether or not he betrayed Whiting, he did sit on the jury that condemned him. And whether or not the rhyme was about him, the legend has stuck for over 300 years. It's this duality, innocence cloaking greed, that makes little Jack Horner so compelling. He is the archetype of someone who benefits from chaos without appearing to cause it. The childlike face masking adult ambition. A nursery rhyme turned cautionary tale. And let's not forget, the rhyme only praises Jack. It doesn't question how the plum got there, or whether he earned it. In that way, it mirrors real history, where the powerful often rewrite the story, leaving us only with whispers and riddles. Today, Mel's Manor still stands, and the Horner family line continues. The original legal deed sits preserved, a record of a royal transaction, not a crime. But still, something about the rhyme continues to trouble historians and folklorists alike. Why did it endure? Why this story? Perhaps because, beneath its sing-song charm, it speaks to something timeless, the way greed hides behind goodness, and how easily we accept a reward when we don't have to ask where it came from. So, next time you hear that rhyme, listen closely. Not just to the words, but to the silence between them. That's where the secrets live. And if you enjoy uncovering the twisted truths behind seemingly innocent tales, consider subscribing to the Silent Lodge. We explore the shadows others fear to touch. And there's always another secret waiting in the dark. Until next time, darklings, sleep with one eye open.